Hi everybody, I'm Bill Sharp, St. Andrews class of '68, and welcome to the Rocks and Razorbacks podcast. Here, we feature conversations with remarkable alumni, teachers, and administrators from both Middleton and St. Andrews high schools. This is a great way to share meaningful stories and keep our memories alive of growing up in West Ashland. Now for today's show.
Nostalgia. Reminiscing fondly, well, mainly fondly, of days gone by. This theme plays a big part of our upcoming documentary. Fortunately for us, the College of Charleston is home to Dr. Chelsea Reid-Short, a psychology professor whose primary interest is the study of nostalgia. Chelsea met me recently on campus, and we got to talk about the pros and cons of looking back. Chelsea, thanks for joining us today. And let's start off with what got you interested in nostalgia to begin with?
Sure. So I was working on my PhD in social psychology at Virginia Commonwealth University in Richmond, Virginia. And my research interests broadly were about our need to belong. So the human fundamental search for seeking out and maintaining close relationships. And so when I came across nostalgia through the help of my academic advisor, Jeffrey Green, I learned that this was a process that was simultaneously about the self, so how we conceptualize ourselves, who we think we are, as well as our close relationships. And that really piqued my interest because nostalgia is this sentimental longing for treasured moments in your past that chiefly focus on relationships with your close others, like your friends, your family members. So you're thinking back to these moments that you had with them. So you can be by yourself, all on your own, and still experience these close relationships. And as a result, have these feelings of enhanced social connection. So that was really powerful for me.
I'm curious to see if that triggered anything for you. I'm not going to ask your age, but what are you nostalgic for?
Oh gosh, so many things. Like most people, I can think back to moments in childhood, high school, things like that. I actually am still friends with the same women I've been friends with since age 10. And we will still get together and talk about these kinds of moments in our lives. We all lifeguard. This is like the first thing that pops in my memory talking about them is we all lifeguarded together. We're on swim team together at the same neighborhood pool. And so I have a lot of nostalgia for kind of summer swim league and all those moments at Royal Pool. And, even though it's been a number of years, we still talk about that all the time. And if I smell like chlorine, I'm right back there.
Can you tell me what are some of the triggers for nostalgia, just for the average person?
Okay. So it can be something like a narrative storytelling. So you get together with someone and you start going, hey, do you remember when? And that can, just create like a flood of various memories. But it can also be a lot of sensory stimuli. So you might be walking down the street and a certain smell hits you and it takes you right back. Or maybe you're listening to the radio or Spotify on Discovery and a song comes on and it takes you right back. Food is also a big one. And it could be something you're trying a food. It could be a similar flavor to what you've experienced in the past. It could even just be a mention of a food that you had, like school lunch pizza or something like that. And it'll take you right back.
That's right. Yeah. In my limited research of nostalgia, it apparently was a negative thing when it was first diagnosed or thought of way back when.
Yeah, in the 1600s, it was assumed to be a negative emotion. So there was a Swiss medical student who was observing French and Italian mercenaries in the lowlands and observing that they were experiencing this homesickness and despondency. And he assumed it was because of nostalgia. So he actually coined the term nostalgia. His name was Johannes Hofer, coined the term nostalgia. And he made the assumption that it was their longing for their alpine homelands that was actually creating this despondency. And so he thought it was like a disease of the brain, right? But that wasn't scientific. It was an assumption. And that assumption lingered through the 18th and 19th centuries until more recently, starting particularly in 2006 with Tim Wildschutz's seminal work. We've now learned that nostalgia, or we've learned scientifically now, that nostalgia is a predominantly positive experience. And the kind of misconception from those early days was that there can be a link between these negative experiences and nostalgia. But it turns out that rather than nostalgia creating negative experiences, it was actually negative experiences creating nostalgia. So something bad happens, you're experiencing something unpleasant, negative affect, that will then elicit nostalgia, which then helps you feel better and cope with those negative experiences.
Can you tell me about the benefits and detriments of nostalgia if somebody sort of like finds themselves entrenched in that for whatever reason?
Yeah, so let's start with the detriments because there are very few. Really just one. So when we're thinking about personal nostalgia, so that's you re-experiencing mentally a moment from your personal past, something that you personally experienced. There's only really one downside, and that is that nostalgia is a bittersweet emotion. So it's predominantly positive. We mostly experience positive affect, but there's going to be this little twinge of negative affect. So the reason that occurs is because you are mentally transporting yourself back to this treasured moment, this really wonderful time in your life, right? But it is something that is now in the past, and that's where that little twinge of negativity comes in, that this was a monumentous occasion, joyous occasion, something pleasant for you, something touching for you, but it's no longer in the present today. So that's where that little twinge comes in. So the benefits of nostalgia are far more extensive. You experience far more positive affect than you do negative affect. You also experience a greater sense of self-continuity, so feeling like you are today, still connected to the person that you were. You experience higher levels of self-regard, so thinking well about yourself. You also experience higher levels of social connectedness, so you have this greater sense that you have loved ones, that you feel loved and connected to others. We also tend to feel a greater sense that life is meaningful, which is a really fun one. And there's also a greater sense of optimism and vitality. And there's also evidence that we experience greater pro-social behaviors. So when you experience nostalgia, you're also going to be more likely to give to others, and even donating to charity. So it's a really wonderful emotion, both for us individually with our own benefits, and then also inspiring us to do nice things for other people as well.
Well, our documentary deals with two schools that are going away. They're no longer exist, but one's going to be just bulldozed soon. And if somebody seems to have a problem dealing with that, what advice would you give them?
I would say, while the physical building will no longer be there, you do still have your cherished memories. And that's actually what you're really getting the benefits from. So take some time to really enjoy those memories. Take a moment, many moments, to sit down and go through the old yearbooks, to talk with your former classmates or reach out to them and, chat about the experiences that you had, or pass along some of those stories to other people who are in your life now, friends, family members, your kids, and share those moments. And through mentally transporting yourself back to those experiences, you're gonna really experience some wonderful benefits from that. You're gonna have some feel good times. Yeah.
Oh, great! I think a lot of people will be happy to hear that. When it comes to nostalgia, is there been any research as to the years that people seem to focus on more than others?
So we do tend to see that nostalgia for childhood, adolescence is fairly prominent. So it makes sense that we might be thinking back to our high school years and having some nostalgia there. You can also feel nostalgic for any important moment from your past. So maybe there was a family holiday that you all gathered together on, or an important vacation, or your first dance at your wedding. Any of these moments that were particularly meaningful for you. So that's the key, is that they're pleasant memories that were meaningful for you in some way and involved your close others. as we get later into life, we might be looking back more and more. So we do tend to see that you kind of have this spike in nostalgia, maybe in our later years, but also at times of transition. So yeah, I think as we get older, high school is going to be something we're going to be nostalgic for. Yeah.
One thing that's kind of new, especially for folks my age, is social media being so prevalent, and you decide to just turn it on and flip through it. Next thing you know, there's some sort of the 80s, there's the 90s, there's the 70s, and the headline might very well be why it was better back then. Do we have any false memories?
Oh gosh.
That might drive someone to create these things?
I mean, we all have false memories. That's basic human behavior, cognition, that we're going to have some false memories. But in terms of whether it was actually better then, who knows, really? I think there are some scientists out there that would tell you that things are better than they ever have been in terms of scientific advancement, medicine, on and on and on, lifespans. There's lots of reasons to think that things are better now than they maybe used to be, in at least some ways. But in terms of, how we feel, that's really subjective. And so, we can look back at those times, and we're probably going to be focusing on those positive moments. And so when you're focusing on those positive moments, you're probably going to be more likely to think, oh, it was better then. And that might just be a selection effect of the memories that we recall, right? There's something called the fading affect bias, that over time, our negative emotions tend to fade more quickly than our positive emotions. So the further we get from an event, it tends to be the good feelings that stick around longer. And so as we're kind of looking back on these moments, that also might be one reason that we're kind of thinking back to the positive more.
Sounds like a defense mechanism almost.
I mean, it can definitely be helpful for coping. So nostalgia has been characterized as a resource for the self. So when we experience challenging times, we actually may be more likely to experience nostalgia as a result. So some research has found that when mortality salience is high, so all of us are here for a brief period of time, and when that is something that is at the forefront of our minds more, we might experience more nostalgia, and that might help us kind of deal with that existential threat and fear. Other research has shown that even something like boredom, nostalgia can help us, recover from that. Some relatively recent research, some colleagues and I conducted, we looked at individuals who had lost a loved one to death. And we found that individuals who were experiencing nostalgia at higher rates were actually coping with that bereavement more effectively. So there's all sorts of ways in which we're experiencing challenging times. Nostalgia might be something that kind of helps us through it.
Interesting. There's so many people, of course, that have joined our Facebook group, and they are obviously, most of them, I guess 99.9 seems to be the benefits of nostalgia, and fondly, lovingly remember these schools and teachers and their experiences as well. But I have come across some that say they want to tailgate when the old Middleton is actually bulldozed down, as if tearing away some sort of bad memory.
Yeah.
Any type of studies showing that nostalgia helps people live healthier or live longer lives?
In terms of longer lives, I mean, if we think about health, we do see a lot of evidence, at least for psychological health, right? That we're experiencing greater optimism, vitality, feelings of meaning in life, and, feeling more positivity, greater self-regard. And, certainly those things could probably help us pursue healthier behaviors. And that's something that has been talked about in the nostalgia literature quite a bit, that nostalgia is actually this kind of approach-oriented experience, that it kind of gives us this motivation to take action, to approach things, rather than to be passive or avoid things. So that might be, I guess, sort of an answer.
Yeah, there you go. Do the memories we have help shape us as people?
Absolutely. Yeah. So when we think about nostalgia, it is deeply subjective, deeply personal. What you're nostalgic for might be something different than from what I'm nostalgic for, and that's because we've had different experiences in life. So from the start, nostalgia is all about us and what we've experienced. So, what I've come into contact with in my past experiences is going to kind of drive what I might be nostalgic for. And then as I move forward, kind of drawing on that reservoir of these happy memories is going to help me kind of carry forward to the future. And we know that one of the outcomes of this nostalgic reverie is that it does make us feel more connected to our past selves, like who we were in those past moments in our present time. And so, that's still kind of working into my current self-concept.
You mentioned this before, but music and songs play such a gigantic part. I actually came across this term called earworms.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with that?
Yeah.
Can you explain what that is?
So you hear a song that's now stuck in your head, and you just can't seem to get it out. For nostalgia, actually one of the earliest papers I read on nostalgia was actually about music evoked nostalgia. And it was the inspiration piece for my first nostalgia publication. We actually used a lot of the methodology and the design from that research to kind of help generate other nostalgia research on external stimuli. So it was all about music and song lyrics, and then we did scents, and then we did foods. So yeah, music evoked nostalgia is big. You could hear a song and it'll take you right back to your senior prom. Or maybe right back to an important moment with your high school sweetheart. If it was maybe it was like your song with your boyfriend or girlfriend. And when that plays, it can sometimes just feel like you are just mentally transported right back to that moment. You can visualize it. You can hear, whatever conversation was happening then. You're going to re-experience those emotions almost as if that event is happening again right now.
Why do you think the memories from the alumni, 40, 50 years ago from school seem almost more like yesterday? And we could not even tell you what we had for lunch yesterday, but I can remember something from 1978.
Yeah.
What is there a scientific reason for that?
So, what we had for lunch yesterday is probably not particularly important to us, but these important occasions or important moments early in our lives are probably particularly important to us. And if you asked a developmental psychologist, they would tell you that this period of adolescence, early adulthood, from a developmental standpoint, is really an identity formation stage. So it's this time in your life where you're figuring out who you are and who you want to be. And so the experiences that you're having at that time are really impactful in determining who you are going to be in life. And it's also a time where our social connections with our friends are incredibly important in our lives. They take this kind of primary role. And so high school is this very social experience with our peers at a time where we're figuring out who we are and what we want to be as we move forward into our lives. So these are really important, impactful times from a psychological perspective. So that's going to stay with us.
So you could see why it means so much to so many to realize the schools are going away.
Yeah, absolutely. It can feel a little bit like you've lost a piece of yourself in that way. That, this really key feature of your life is no longer going to have this kind of physical presence in the world. Yeah. So that's that bittersweetness, right, of nostalgia, that twinge of negative affect.
I always thought it was a shame that the negative memories can be just as strong and powerful as the positive ones, and sometimes even more so. I played on the baseball team, 2 for 7. I couldn't tell you a lot about those days, mm-hmm. but I do remember being thrown out at home mm-hmm. against Somerville High School, and
There's a smile on your face when you're talking about it, though.
What's funny is because this has brought me to sort of reconnect with the coach, and that was just wonderful for us, for Neil Kiner and myself to do that. He has memories of Coach more as a teacher, and I have him as a baseball coach, and so we interviewed him, and was just wonderful to realize that, he's just a little bit older than we were back then. And teachers have such fond memories of their students and their events too. He wouldn't remember me being thrown out at home. He did remember my home run I hit against North Charleston, and I was like, oh, wow, it just blew me away. So that was really happy to see that.
We can have nostalgia for moments where it's like a triumphant arc, right? So maybe there was this challenging moment, things weren't going well, but we emerged victorious, or it ultimately ended up in a way that we benefited some way, like that we experienced some growth, or maybe we lost the game, but we had a great time with our friends. So whether or not it's ultimately a negative memory, it's kind of hard to say, I think sometimes. You have to kind of really look at the content, like what was making you smile, right? What were the experiences? Was the camaraderie that you had with your teammates of going through this experience together?
For me, it just might be that when I was in high school, I don't think I appreciated it as much as I do now.
Yeah. And
that's disappointing. But then again, I'm also glad that maybe I'm finding it. All right, how much are you charging for this session?
I'm not a practitioner. I am not trained in practicing. I'm research and teaching. So free, yeah.
Just how positive or negative is it being overly nostalgic about high school?
Ooh, I don't know if I would use the term overly nostalgic. I don't know that we have any evidence that there is too much nostalgia for an individual. The overwhelming evidence is that it is a predominantly positive emotion that we experience many benefits from. There is that twinge of negativity because it is a moment that's in your past, but overwhelmingly, nostalgia is beneficial for us. It makes us feel good in a lot of different ways.
Any tips on just how we can keep these memories alive?
Sharing the memories, talking about them out loud to other people, getting to kind of mentally relive that experience and getting to elaborate on it by telling other people, I think is going to be really helpful to kind of keeping those memories alive. You revisit it, and so it's salient to you again in your mind, and so that's going to kind of keep it fresher. Listen to the music, right? And enjoy.
Thanks for watching today's episode, and be on the lookout for additional episodes. If you'd like to be a guest or even a host in the Rocks and Razorbacks podcast, please let us know. We want the podcast to be the go-to place for cherished Middleton and St. Andrews memories. Don't forget, the Rocks and Razorbacks documentary geared for South Carolina ETV is in production, and we'd love your input and help with that as well. For now, go Rocks and, go Hogs. Well, you get it. Thanks.